Welcome back to the Go to Go podcast, man. Episode 91, NBA Conference Finals set, man. First game tip tonight between the Knicks Pacers. Eastern Conference getting started tonight at 8. Tomorrow night, Western Conference tip off between the Wolves and the Mavs, 8:30 Eastern as well, man. So, I mean, between last podcast episode and this one, both series concluded. Mavs going 6 games against the Thunder. Timberwolves taking every last game down to the last quarter, basically in Game 7 for their matchup. If you want to go ahead, comment on those two, Game 6 and Game 7 in the West.
It really just came down to, it was the story of Minnesota, because I believe the last time we were talking, Denver just went on that 2-game run, tied it up, looked really good on the road. But, yeah, then after that, Minnesota goes back home, wins by like 25, just pretty much shot the Nuggets out the gym. Really good defense. And then Game 7, one of the best Game 7s I've seen, keeping track of it and watching it and stuff. 20-point lead in the third quarter for the Denver Nuggets. And the way the Timberwolves kind of just kept fighting back. Anthony Edwards didn't have his best game offensively, but really stepped it up on the defensive side of the ball. Made it really tough for Jamal Murray in the second half, who was really on fire in that first half. So Anthony Edwards contributing to the game on both ends of the ball. Jaden McDaniels and Cat, those guys really kind of, carried offensively. And then Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert, they kind of did what they had to do. Rudy didn't have the best first half, but kind of like the rest of those guys in Minnesota, turned it around in the second half. But Naz Reid played a really big part, was like a spark off of the bench offensively. And then also came in and gave great help, great size to kind of contain Jokic as much as you can. But for the Denver Nuggets, you just got to get more from everyone else because, you get 30 points from Jokic and Jamal Murray. Like I mentioned, Murray had a super hot first half. Jokic kind of just gave you what he gave you. Had, 33 points, about 9 boards and 7 assists. So for Jokic, that's about as good as you can ask for him.
19 boards.
19 boards, excuse me. Yeah, way off on the boards. But, Jamal Murray and Jokic, you just need more. We talked about Michael Porter Jr. We talked about guys like Aaron Gordon. They got to step up. KCP really didn't add much else for them. So, I think it just showed a team effort and defense got it done from Minnesota. It literally took every single quarter, like you mentioned, bro. Literally all the way to the fourth quarter to where they finally, got out ahead. And then even then, Cat with the turnover on the baseline late in the game kind of seemed like, maybe we go to overtime. Maybe, the Nuggets find a way to pull this off. But ultimately, I just think the big story for that series is defense and team basketball from the Nuggets was just a little too much for Denver to handle.
Yeah, I'm right with you. Aaron Gordon, 4 points. He was a key part in most of their wins this series. Michael Porter Jr., 7 points. KCP, 5 points. Each of them Porter logging 34. KCP and Aaron Gordon, 40-plus minutes in that game. And Jamal Murray, I believe he had 27 at halftime, finished with 35. So held to 8 points in that second half. A lot of points off turnovers, big transition, momentum swings on turnovers from Murray, pokes by Ant. He had the dunk in transition. One led to that corner three he had. You mentioned Naz Reid. He only had 11 points, but his role felt way bigger than just 11 points. He came off, and he was a spark plug, especially in that second half, fourth quarter. His defense and his ability to guard 2 people in that pick and roll with Jamal and Jokic, being able to hedge and then get back to Jokic to play phenomenal defense and force a tough shot from him, it became key. And I think one of the keys on the Nuggets was in the fourth quarter, on the defensive side of the ball, they looked lost. They looked tired, out of shape, and just like they really didn't want it. You saw the T-Wolves youth kind of show up between, Ant, Jaden McDaniels, Alexander Walker, Naz Reid. All those guys were playing high energy, high motors, moving around the court, flying around on defense, while the Nuggets were the exact opposite. They looked stale. Primary defender gets blown by. There was really no help at the rim. Put back dunks by Naz Reid. They just weren't cleaning up the little things. And I think the T-Wolves did the little things in that fourth quarter, which is what ultimately led them to winning that game. And the Nuggets, you get 60 points from your two stars. You expect to win that game 7. And everyone made that joke. Jokic standing up fourth quarter of game 6 that he was going to come out to play. He did. No, he's not a defensive player, but his effort in the fourth quarter, I know logging 47 minutes that game, he's, got to be gassed. But game 7, last game of the year, last minutes possibly of your season as defending champs. Just want to see a little bit more effort. Fatigue definitely played a role for him, but I mean, you get 34, 19, and 7, like you said, and you lose that game. It's tough. And Ant not having his best game. I mean, Jaden McDaniels really stepped up in a big-time fashion in games 6 and 7, averaged 22 and 5 boards, and shot 75% from the field. So, he made that joke at the beginning of the playoffs where, they got KD, we got Jaden McDaniels, but it's really looking like, Jaden McDaniel, 3-and-D guy, when his number's called, he stepped up. And, I mean, he knocked down some big-time shots, making big plays on both ends of the courts for the Timberwolves. So just kind of like you saw, the Nuggets walk all over the Lakers with their role players. Porter Jr. was going off. Gordon was going off. Braun was going off. The Wolves role players stepped up in big-time fashion. And Cat, with, everything that was going on with him, in the middle of that series where he was questioning his ability to be, a number 2, he stepped up in Game 7 and gave them the biggest 23 points, I think, of his career. In that Game 7, where the stage was brightest, he stepped up and, showed why he deserves to be in this league as one of the best big men. And, knocking off the defending champ Nuggets, no one thought it was possible. But you look at it now, obviously, you got Ant. If he steps it up in that conference finals, this Nuggets, T-Wolves team is a young, scary team, kind of like what you were hoping the Thunder to be, but you got Ant leading this team, and they're gonna go as far as Ant takes them. And if these role players keep playing with confidence, which I think they will, the ceiling for him is pretty high this year. So Mike Conley did his thing too, vet presence at the point guard position. He did everything he was asked for too. They just got guys all around. When Rudy Gobert's hitting turnaround post fades, like shot clock running down.
It's tough.
That's like where you're playing 2K. You might just go ahead and leave the match. Like if Rudy's hitting that, man, it's over. So you said it. Game 7, maybe one of the best ones you saw. 20-point deficit, and they climbed all the way back. So they made it look easy in that third end of the third, fourth quarter. And then, that's going to lead – well, let's head to the Eastern Conference first. We got Pacers-Celtics tonight. That Pacers series between the Knicks, obviously the banged-up Knicks squad. The Celtics, on the other hand, they've had a lot of rest this postseason, 5 games and 5 games in their 2 series. Pacers, on the other hand, they went the distance against the Knicks, so they're going to be, coming off not as fresh as the Celtics. I always talk about rest versus rust, but Game 1 at the Garden, where the Celtics have been so dominant this year, your take on this matchup?
Yeah, I think you mentioned kind of, the rest the Celtics have, and the Pacers, they've pretty much been playing all playoffs, won 6 with the Bucks, and then just won 7 with the Knicks, so those guys have been go, whereas you mentioned the Celtics, a team who could probably use some of that rest, especially with Porzingis, who is expected to miss probably the first couple games of this series. Honestly, you probably won't even need him, but, we'll get into that with this matchup. But the Pacers literally shot the most efficient ever in playoff history against the Knicks in Game 7, and that's what it took. They just weren't missing at all, so I think that's one thing that can give the Celtics some trouble if the Pacers they come out and they're playing that running gun offense, and they're out shooting all these threes and getting out ahead of the break and stuff like that. Maybe that can cause some trouble for the Celtics, but I mean, if you look at the way the Celtics are built, especially without Porzingis, it's kind of how they want to play. They just want to go out and score. They got a bunch of ball handlers, a bunch of guys that can control the ball. They can shoot. So I feel like pace-wise, the Celtics will be able to keep up with the Indiana Pacers just as much as long as Porzingis isn't playing. Once Porzingis is fully healthy and he comes in, I think the offense does slow down a little bit, but the offense gets so much better when you add that element of Porzingis. But right now, the way this team is constructed, it's kind of going to be like, the Celtic we've seen the last couple of years where Tatum's the primary scorer. He's a primary ball handler, but you got guys like Derek White. You got guys like Jaylen Brown who can get out and score just as well, not really looking to run things through the paint, through a big man, more perimeter oriented. They're going to shoot a bunch of threes. So I expect this to be a high scoring first game. I think both of these teams are going to come out and just start shooting the ball, and both of these teams shoot the ball well also. So it's going to be a fun, I think, scoring wise, but the Celtics just have too much depth. I think they have too much size, especially on the perimeter. Whereas you look at the Knicks, Jalen Brunson was their best player, but he's an undersized guard, and you got as much credit as you want to give him, as crafty as he is and how elite he is at scoring. It's just totally different when you have size and so much of it on that perimeter. You got guys like Tatum, you got Brown, like I mentioned, Derek White, Drew Holiday. All those guys are 6'4" plus. Like in Jalen Brunson, is maybe 6 foot, maybe 6'1" on a good day, depending on
shoes on.
Yeah, and what website you check. So it's gonna be definitely different. A lot of those guys are gonna have some trouble guarding that height and that size on the perimeter. So I think the Celtics take advantage of that on the perimeter, and we just see them kind of just score the ball at ease on the perimeter, shooting, getting to the rack, getting past the guys. But I do think the Pacers are going to be able to score. They're going to shoot the ball. So, like I mentioned, I think it'll be a high-scoring series, a high-scoring couple of first games until Porzingis comes back, and we see how they kind of adjust, or even if they do bring him back, depending on how the series goes. But, yeah, I think the Celtics get it done in 5 games again. Like, I don't see why not.
I mean, I think this is Celtics' kind of dream matchup with the Pacers in terms of pace, because, the Pacers if they don't score on that end, I mean, it's just going to lead to transition threes, and that's what the Celtics kind of thrive on, is shot chucking those 3 balls. And if they get them out in transition, they're going to be letting them fly all day. So, and while I love the Celtics matchups, my only question is, can Pascal Siakam kind of step up and be the guy? I think he will this series if the Pacers want to have a chance. Because matchup-wise, are you going to put, Tatum, your best offensive player, on Siakam the whole game? And if he does, will he be gassed? I know the Celtics have a lot of depth, so they can lean on a lot of guys, whether it's on the defensive or even offensive end. But if he can give him work on one end and kind of tire him out, and then force tough shots on the other end, I mean, it could go 6. I still like the Celtics in this series. They just got a way deeper roster, way better team, top to bottom. You mentioned Derek White, the best shot blocking guard in the league. He causes havoc on the defensive side. And you saw what he could do offensively, what he did against the Heat in the first round. So, I mean, you're just going to lean on all these guys. The depth, it's just too much at the end of the day. I mean, can the Pacers take advantage of Al Horford for 20 minutes when he's in the game? And I mean, that's really where we're going to have to win their matchups. I know Halliburton's their guy, but these other guys are going to have to step up where the Celtics are a lot weaker, because Halliburton's going to have his plate full, whether it's Brown, whether it's White, whether it's Drew Holiday, all excellent perimeter defenders who can, shot block, they get steals. It's going to be tough for the Pacers. So they're going to have to shoot like they did in Game 7 if they want to have a chance at all in this series.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they were hitting turnaround Jays, hand in the face, I mean, almost tipping the ball, and it was still going in. So they're going to need some of that magic if they want to have a chance. Just how deep the Celtics team is. No, I give them a lot of hate for their superstar play, but I don't think they really need superstar play at this point in the conference finals. I think the team's just too deep. It's too well built. And, I mean, even without Porzingis, they put Porzingis in the mix. It's it's gonna be a tough task for the Indiana Pacers to say the least. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned the matchup with Siakam. I think that's going to be a key matchup as well. And if I'm Joe Mazzulla, if I'm Jason Tatum, I'm taking it upon myself. Like, I'm sticking Siakam this entire series because if you look around the league, like, so far, defense has been, kind of the highlight, and that's how guys are winning. You look at Anthony Edwards, he's come out multiple times. He's said, I'm taking pride. He's trying to be the best two-way player. He's trying to elevate his defense. And you look at what happened in Game 7, didn't have the best offensive game, but he elevated his defense. That's what caused them to win. You look at Kyrie, not, the number one option for the Mavs right now, but Kyrie can score with anybody in the league, one of the best offensive players, ball handlers we've seen, it, not even in just a generation, but of all time. And you hear him, what he's coming out this postseason, he's like, I'm trying to make more of an effort on the defensive side of the ball. He's trying to impact the game more. And he hasn't been, having these crazy scoring outbursts in the playoffs like we know Kyrie, but the effort and the defense that he's giving has definitely helped the Mavericks so far to this point. So, I mean, you kind of see the trend going on around the league, these teams that are winning, these teams that are having success. If I'm Jason Tatum, that's where I'm going to focus all of my energy on this series. And Tatum's definitely stepped up this season defensively as well. And like you mentioned, like we talked about, this whole playoff run into the NBA season, the Celtics have so much depth. Like, Jason Tatum can afford to put all his energy on the defensive side of the ball because they have, if you take away Tatum, 3 other guys that can handle the ball, three other guys that can go give you a bucket. They got options off of the bench that can come off, get hot at any moment, can provide scoring. So if you're Jason Tatum, you don't really have to be the superstar that scores, and I think that's important, especially if Boston wants to win the championship. Like, you got to make sacrifices. That's the main thing. You got to, do things maybe a different way just to help your team win, take advantage of matchups. Like, if his best option is playing defense and stopping maybe the biggest threat for the Pacers defensively, then maybe, it's a big Jaylen Brown series. Maybe we see Jrue Holiday finally get his feet underneath him. Maybe some of those other guys that can score, that have the ability to get buckets, we see them take advantage, whereas they don't have to, work as hard on the defensive side of the ball. So I think you mentioned that that'll be something really interesting to watch to see if, are the Celtics or Jason Tatum willing to take that next step to try to play, championship basketball, because I guarantee you if they beat the Pacers, like in the next series, you're going to have to play defense, whether it's Anthony Edwards and the way that Minnesota team is playing right now. You mentioned Jaden McDaniels, 20 points in the last 2 games. Naz Reid, he's coming off. Those guys are scoring. And then Luka and Kyrie, like, you're going to have to guard some of them. So those guys can score as well. They got P.J. Washington. He's also had,
he's been
20-point games. He's shooting the ball lights out as well. So all these teams have options to score. So regardless if you do it this series or in the finals, Tatum is going to have to step up defensively and do his best to try to, neutralize one of the main players, one of the main scorers, and let that depth and, the scoring ability of everyone else kind of shine and take the forefront, if the Celtics really want to win. So it'll be an interesting matchup to see how Tatum approaches this game and this series so far.
Yeah, I'm gonna say he doesn't have that dog in him. So
he runs from the grind,
runs from the opportunity to silence, and I think I don't see Tatum on the other end. He has improved defensively, but I just don't see him, guarding Siakam for the whole game, or I just don't see it.
But you agree, like, if he does that, that's like a winning formula.
No,
for the
I think that
team.
is because like I said, he could take the possessions off on offense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's going to be too much for the Pacers to handle, 1 through 5, or for the Celtics, it's like 1 through 8 who can, go get a bucket anytime. And so I see where you're coming from. It is the matchup, what Mazzulla probably would want on paper. Question is, does Tatum, arise to the occasion? We'll see, because they definitely will need some rest if they're going to play. At least Porzingis will, if they're going to play, one of those teams in the Western Conference in the NBA Finals, because they will have their hands full. Speaking of that Western Conference Finals, so you got Celtics in 5.
Yeah, I'll take Boston in 5 against the Pacers. Yeah.
I think the Pacers able to squeak out 2. I'm gonna give them Boston in 6. Close it out in Indiana.
You sure you don't want Indy in 7, bro?
I mean, I want Indy in 7, but I just don't. I'm being real, man. I could be a hater or whatever, but it's Pacers. I mean, Celtics in 6. It's too hard, too much depth. Like you said, Tatum doesn't need to play the best ball of his life. Neither does. Everyone contributes, one of these guys steps up each and every game. It's going to be hard for the Pacers. They're going to need to play lights out for at least 4 games in the series if they want a chance, to win it. So, 75% from the field, that's tough. Mavs T-Wolves tomorrow night in Minnesota. Charles Barkley's first time there in 20 years, according to his post-game presser with Ant. But this is a matchup I like. Before I pass it over to you, I think Kyrie is going to be the X factor in this series, whether you look at it matchup-wise. But your take on this?
I think this is also going to be I think this is an intriguing series. In terms of, I think you kind of knew what you were getting when you looked at the, 2 previous matchups. You knew the Minnesota and Denver. You knew that was going to be a heavyweight battle. We both said it, probably 6-7 games. I mean, every single game, it looked like the better team, the team that won that night was the better team. Like, it just went back and forth.
You were like, this is the Nuggets series now after they tied it up.
Exactly. That series went back and forth. There wasn't really any close games until that last final game. And then you look on the other side where you have Dallas and OKC. OKC definitely made it competitive, but, towards the end of the last 2 games, you kind of saw that, the experience, the calmness, the ability to just score the ball at will from Luka and Kyrie and just be able to, come up in the big moments seemed just to be a little too overwhelming for OKC, whereas SGA, he stepped up. He had an amazing playoff run, especially in this series. Yeah. He had a great, couple games, but everyone else kind of,
outside of SGA, they
fizzled off, J-Dub, he was like he was their leading scorer, I think, in the 4th quarter this season. He was a big reason, they were there and had a lot of regular season success. He dropped off. Shet kind of disappeared as well.
Lou Dort couldn't hit a shot to save his life. He
was fouling more than he was scoring. I mean, Cason Wallace showed some bright flashes, but then again, he was a rookie. You can't really expect much. So kind of what we figured from this OKC team. Super young.
Rookie.
Exactly.
Cason.
But, it was nice to them to get this experience. It definitely, took the Mavs 6 games. Big ups to them, but the Mavs just seemed like the better team. And I think, at the end of the day, their size, Lively and Gafford, were just a little too much for OKC to handle because outside of, Chet, who was struggling at best, you didn't have anything else besides him. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be the key to this matchup. I think I'm going to pick Minnesota, and I'm going to pick them in 6, and I think it's because of the options they have at the bigs. Whereas Luka and Kyrie, you kind of just saw them. Yeah, Dort played really good defense on Luka, or as good as you can. But, once Luka was getting a switch, once he was kind of getting to his spots and stuff, like the lob was there every single time for the Mavericks. Like it looked, even at times down the stretch, it looked like Kyrie and Luka were, looking for that lob more than they were trying to score. So inside they just were able to have their way. And then you kind of look at the flip side, whereas Minnesota, they were probably just guarding, the hardest matchup for anyone in the NBA in terms of Jokic, just because of how big he is and how he plays the game inside out. So I think for these bigs in Minnesota, it's going to be like a breath of fresh air. If you're going from Nikola Jokic to now you're going to Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, like that's night and day compared to how those guys play. The 2 bigs from Dallas are kind of just in the dunker spot, not really doing much.
Old school big man.
Exactly. Where you have Nikola Jokic, who is literally the offense and runs everything from anywhere on the floor. He can pull you out from up top. He can run the offense down from in the paint right underneath the rim. So I think it'll be a lot easier for the bigs on Minnesota. I think Rudy Gobert and Kat, they don't really have to worry about the inside scoring like they did. So I think it'll be a tougher matchup on the perimeter for Ant and Jaden McDaniels, like you mentioned. But inside, I think if Kyrie, if Luka, if those guys are, able to beat their matchups and get inside, there's going to be basically like a wall at the rim. So unless, unless Dallas can come out and they're just on fire from the field and they're knocking down all their threes and all of their shots in the mid ranges and like little floaters they can do before they get to the rim, I think it can get ugly because we saw how this defense kind of swarmed Nikola Jokic. I think having a secondary ball handler on the perimeter will definitely make it easier in terms of spreading out that Minnesota defense because Jokic, like I mentioned, he can run the offense from anywhere, but he's a big man. He's going to be down low in the post. He's running the screen and roll with Murray. Whereas you got Kyrie and Luka, both of those guys, they're going to be out on the perimeter trying to create as much space as possible. So it's going to be interesting. I think that's going to be the key matchup, though. I think the size for Minnesota kind of just becomes a little too much for Dallas, and they kind of pull away. And then Anthony Edwards, he just has to continue, to just play at this high level he is offensively. Cat, all those guys, if they can just continue to score how they are, I think it'll be a lot easier defensively, and I think they get a lot more easier buckets, especially in transition and stuff like that. So I like the matchup defensively here from Minnesota, so I'm going to take them in 6. I think it'll be a good game, a good series, but, I mean, you can never count out Kyrie and Luka, two guys who've, played some of the biggest basketball, hit the biggest shots in the biggest moments. Like, it could happen. I could see them getting a game or two, and then it's a close game. It could go anywhere, but ultimately, I think the defensive side for Minnesota just turns out to be a little too much for Dallas.
So the reason I say, Kyrie might be kind of the reason if the Mavs want to have a chance, obviously Luka's going to have to do his thing. You mentioned the two big men, easier matchup for Cat and Gobert, obviously, versus guarding the best offensive player in the world in Jokic, is the fact that the Timberwolves defensively, where do you match up? If you got Kyrie, you're going to put 36-year-old Mike Conley on him?
Well, Ant said he's taking on Kyrie. Ant said that's going to be his matchup.
Okay, so then you got Jaden McDaniels.
You put him on Luka.
So does that throw Mike Conley out the starting lineup? Because then you got P.J. Washington on the wing. Is Conley going to guard P.J. Washington? Big size difference there. You mentioned the two big men.
Maybe they start Nas.
Yeah. Nas at the 3.
Run the 3 bigs.
Yeah, 3 big men. I mean, it could be a thing. Do they send one of the big men to the bench? It's going to be a matchup because while Minnesota does have that size, I think the Mavericks might have the quickness with that starting lineup. Obviously, Conley, great defender, almost 30. So he turns 37 years old this year. So obviously, he doesn't have the same step he once did when he came into the league. Still an important key, but I think if the Timberwolves, want to win this series, that there's going to be some rotational changes. Some guys are going to have to step up. Is it going to be Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's a little bit taller, younger than Mike Conley? Is he going to be tasked with guarding a guy like, maybe even Luka, or vice versa? Him and McDaniels could switch between him and Washington, because you mentioned P.J. Washington. He was kind of the savior for this Mavericks team this whole year. He's in the playoffs, at least, to where he stepped up when Luka and Kyrie were down. It was P.J. Washington stepping up and getting buckets. And when Luka turned it up, P.J. Washington was still there, keeping his pace up, while Kyrie was kind of, not doing his thing. So if Kyrie can get to his spots, I feel like not going to be that many 3 balls, but he's going to find his mid-range. I think that's where he'd excel in this series. Ant's going to be guarding him. It's going to be tough. There's going to be open matchups, I think, on the wing with P.J. Washington. So that's something to look out for. I do have the Timberwolves. I think they're the better team all around, complete. The Mavericks, they're just missing a little bit of something, unless Luka,
Yeah, he can hit that next level and elevate. I think there's a chance.
50 points this series,
I like what you mentioned. It's definitely gonna be some size matchups. But if I'm Conley, or if that's who you want to start, to have that point guard, that veteran presence.
Yeah,
I think you do switch him on to P.J. Washington, and like you mentioned, all those guys defensively on Minnesota, they can switch, they can move. Yeah. But if I'm Mike Conley, I just got to contest the shot from PJ, because they're not going to – I mean, if Luka and Kyrie are on the court, PJ Washington's not going to have the ball in his hand. He's not going to be creating. So if you can contest the shot and just play solid perimeter defense, even if he does use the side, if he gets past you, he's not getting to the rim, because you got behind you got Rudy Gobert, who doesn't – he can sag off of Derek Lively if he's he's just a lob threat. Or Gafford. You got Cat, who'll be down there, or Nasri, like all these guys that can move around down low and provide help defense. So just tell, like, if I'm Mike Conley, I just want to, like, just do my best on the perimeter and know that, if I do get beat off the dribble or if I get caught, with the mismatch down low with the size, I got help coming from the other side, because those guys, it's not like Jokic where you have to guard him, as soon as he crosses half court. Yeah, you're not worried about that from Lively and Gafford. So I think that's going to be the key. The big man on the defense for the Timberwolves, what they do best, protect the rim, roam around, grab rebounds. I think they're going to be able to do that, to the max level in this series against the Mavericks. So I think that definitely will be an interesting matchup. And you mentioned there's some guys I like, bring up Kill Alexander Walker for, Luka or Kyrie, and having those guys switch. The one thing I will mention, though, is I think it could be a big Luka series, because you look at Dort. The reason you like him matching up is because of the size. Dort is not a slender guy. He's a big. Everyone's, you could play linebacker. He looks like a football player out there.
Middle linebacker at that, too.
He's got the size, and Luka is a very big guy as well, whereas you look at McDaniels, you might have a little more length and you might have a little more quickness and speed, but if Luka's using his body and putting that into McDaniels, the size matchup, especially Luka, how crafty he is, the way he uses that size to get to, his little turnaround midi, that fadeaway is just so automatic when he shoots it. Like, it's hard to contest. So especially if he's down low using that size, right before he gets to the paint on the elbow, kind of right before those big men have a chance to help. I think that's, like you mentioned, that mid-range. Him and Kyrie are going to have to create and just live in that little mid-range zone right before those guys come out. And then as soon as they get the big men to help, to get them pull out a little bit,
that's
a couple steps, that's
down.
when the lob threats come into play. The bounce pass down low, you get those guys the entry passes inside. So it could be a really big Luka game. He could just come out, and there's nothing you can do if Luka's on fire and he's hitting the step back threes. You can't guard that from anywhere. So I think him and Kyrie are going to have to score a lot. I don't think Kyrie can do that. I'm chilling in the first half. And, I'm going to turn it up in the fourth quarter. I think both of those guys are going to have to come out and put pressure on that defense early 100%. To get those big men to step up, get help, have guys moving on defense, creating a mismatch. Then they can swing the ball, because Kyrie and Luka are both amazing passers. They can get the ball moving. They see the double teams coming. So getting that defense to move, I think, will be the biggest thing for the Mavericks, and scoring on the perimeter is definitely going to be the key for them to opening up that defense and kind of, being able to create and kind of do what they want offensively. But it's going to be tough, because Minnesota's, we saw what they did to Denver. Like, you can't get Nikola Jokic, like, if he's having trouble and those guys can't really have their way to defense, it's going to be tough. But it's going to be a really interesting matchup. I could see it definitely going either way, but I'm with you. I think the depth and the defense and the kind of a few extra options Minnesota has to go to will be a little bit too much, because they got the size. And then if you look at the offensive end of the ball, like, you can't play Gafford and Lively at the same time. Yeah. But what you can do is you can play Cat and Naz Reid. You can play Rudy and Cat. So I think it'll definitely be some size mismatches, just because offensively those guys can stretch the floor. Naz Reid, he shot the ball really well. Cat, arguably the best big man 3-point shooter of all time. He's been on fire this playoff. So those guys can definitely cause some mismatches and some issues on the offensive side of the ball as well. So I just think the size for Minnesota just gives them so many options on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I'm just finding the X's and O's interesting, because at some point you mentioned McDaniels, his strength isn't what Dort is at. He does have more length than Dort, but at some point, I mean, if Luka's out here giving 40 apiece, Ant's up for the challenge. Is he gonna go out there and then
kind of even smaller?
He is smaller, but he is stronger.
But he doesn't offer you the size, because
no, that's
he does offer. He's strong, but when you look at Dort and the way he compares to Luka, like he was like a solid. So Ant might be a little bit stronger, a little bit bigger, but I don't think
I'm talking about in terms of Jay McDaniels.
Yeah. I'm just saying in terms of like switching on Luka. He is
smaller, yeah. It'll also be interesting. Are they going to switch around all these pick and rolls? Are they going to try to stick one-on-one? If the Mavericks get one of those big men outside on the perimeter, is it, it's going to come down to X's and O's. I think this is a good coaching matchup. It's going to come down to, the X's and O's if the Mavericks want to execute and get these tedious matchups. And then, I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be Luka and Kyrie on the court, go get buckets. At the end of the day, that's what you could say about the Mavericks down the stretch. X's and O's only takes you so far. So for Ant, he can't really have that game 7 he had against the Nuggets offensively. I mean, I think it was 5 out of the 7 games he stepped up offensively and excelled in most of those games as well. So I think this is a great matchup out here in the West. I mean, regardless, all 4 teams remaining, someone's getting their first ring. Yeah. First time champ. It's going to be a fun little series. I know either last week or the week before it, we were talking about, what teams would you like remaining in the playoffs? But 4 teams left, man. I mean, there's some superstars right now. Are you rolling with the hot hand? And if you had to pick one superstar right now, in the playoffs remaining, who's the guy you're taking?
Just one player or like just the team in general?
One player. Because you got Luka, who started cooking.
How they are playing right now, we're like, I'm also like projecting their career.
What they're gonna do, in the span of this final.
Mm-hmm.
So let's
their career is just this playoff.
Just this playoff.
Okay, so from just this playoff, the way
yeah.
I mean, Ant's definitely got to be up there. The way defensively, like we also mentioned, he's able to contribute. Especially knocking off Jokic, that's tough because that'll probably be everyone's first choice. But
yeah, that's what I'm saying now.
Yeah,
Jokic
I think you can't go wrong with Ant if you pick Ant. But I think I will go with Luka, man. I think I will go with Luka just because I've seen him do it more. He's been more consistent. I know I have more experience, and offensively, his bag, just what he does, what he brings to the table, is just unlimited. Like I might not, or I definitely won't get, the same effort and the same stuff on the defensive side of the ball.
But offensively, I'm not
gonna have, like what Anthony Edwards did in Game 7, where he just like disappears. That's not gonna happen with Luka. He's gonna get to his spots. He's gonna get to the free throw line. He's gonna be able to create. So it's an offensive league. So I think I would take Luka. I would say right now Luka's the best player remaining in the playoffs, but Ant is right there, man. Like, if you want to pick Anthony Edwards,
1A, 1B, that's what I meant.
Depending on, if you want to pick him,
offers a little more defensively.
Yeah, a little more athleticism, and, the ceiling might be higher just because we haven't seen how good he can be yet. Whereas Luka is pretty much close to prime. What his ceiling is going to be. Luka could definitely go up. We could see him, reach 1 or 2 more levels, but he's so good right now. This is, like you mentioned, he's in his prime. This is pretty much what Luka is going to be. And it's an amazing offensive player. But, I think in this playoffs, if I had to pick one person, I would pick Luka. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, I think, whether it's ceiling, he's mighty close. Maybe, he gains a step or 2 defensively, because I think offensively he's already in his bag. Like, can you really get any better offensively if you're Luka Doncic? I really don't think so. I mean, he's peak offensive basketball in this league. So maybe if he gets a little bit better defensively down the road, like that's where he could improve. But regardless, I mean, I probably go Luka too at that point. And he does offer the defensive presence, but I think Luka is too gifted and too skilled on the offensive end to just, down the stretch when you really need that closer, because that's what the finals are about. They're about closers. Look at Kyrie. Closed out the Cavs in the finals. You look at finals before, they got closers, whether it was, Jokic last year.
You can even say Murray, too, on that.
Murray was closing out, yep. You really need a bucket getter down the stretch, and while Ant could be that, it's the consistency with Ant at this point in his career. He's still young. He still, plays kind of, I wouldn't say reckless, but, he's young. He's going to learn from his mistakes. Luka's at the point where he's made the mistakes in the playoffs, big stages, and he's fallen short. You could tell.
And he hasn't even made many mistakes in the playoffs.
No,
since his first playoff game, his first series, he's been like lights out.
Yeah, he's just been hasn't been the team around him.
Experience, yeah.
Really hasn't been this good at any point, and while still, I don't think they're the best team. Luka probably is the best player, and he's definitely who I would go with too. I just had to see, and just such an exciting player.
He is.
But I'm gonna go Wolves in 7. I'm gonna go Wolves in 7 with my take. I think this goes 7. It's gonna be tough now with the West after all those games, and whoever comes out on top, I think, matching up with this Celtics team, just anybody, what I'm gonna say, anybody but the Celtics at this point for me. But if you gotta take one team right now, your finals prediction here in the conference finals before it starts.
Finals prediction, I'm gonna say the Wolves, man.
Wolves.
Wolves. At this point, yeah.
Hoisting their trophy.
Anthony Edwards continue to excel and to ascend. I like the Wolves.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with the T-Wolves, man.
Like we mentioned the last couple weeks, man. Like that.
I think
that
whoever
Nuggets,
comes out the West.
Nuggets Wolves series, it felt like the finals, man. That whoever won that series, it felt like would be the best team remaining and will have the best shot to win. Although I think the Celtics still are favored to win just because, the path to get there and just how easy it's been for them. Yeah.
No doubt.
Because, we mentioned...
are you putting a little asterisk that the Celtics win this?
you can't say an asterisk because
whoever
they beat out the West would be, a crazy opponent.
Yes.
But you got to look, both of these West teams, when you look at the Mavericks and you look at the Timberwolves, they're going to be coming off of crazy series. Timberwolves just went 7 with the Nuggets, and then me and you saying the Mavs, saying 6 or 7 games again. The Mavs just went 6, and me and you just picked 6 or 7 again. Whereas,
5 or
Celtics,
6 for the Celtics,
we got them going 5 games, gentlemen sweeping everyone.
10
or
games,
me, yeah. So rest will definitely be a big factor, and maybe fatigue and another team in the West being too worn down. But that's a different conversation for another day. We'll worry about that when we get there because
yeah, we still got time. We could be the Mavs in the finals, man. It could be the Pacers,
It could be, the Wolves could sweep the Mavericks and they get rest. You never know, So or vice versa.
Crazy things happen, man. Yeah. Injuries. Obviously, you don't want to see those. But.
So I was thinking the last time we had a team or a dynasty or a team win back-to-back championships was Golden State.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like the Bucks was going to do it. Giannis was going to go on his little run. Haven't made out of the second round since. Nuggets, Jokic in his prime, Murray, we thought, they're going to go back-to-back. They just got bounced out the first round or the second round. Lakers, they won in 2020. Same thing. They haven't been the same since the bubble.
Yep.
Out of these 4 teams, well, I picked the Timberwolves, so it would be the Timberwolves for me.
Yeah.
Whoever you got picking to win the finals, that's the first question. And second is, do you think that team could go on and be the next dynasty or be the next team to win back-to-back championships?
So obviously I picked the Wolves. I'm gonna say no.
Or is this a 2019 Toronto all over again?
I wouldn't say 2019 Toronto. I think Ant stays.
Well, yeah.
The questions of Cat and Gobert, I feel like at some point that's gotta it's gonna get spread out. Who did they get?
Aging too.
Yep, Karl Anthony Towns. He's been in the league a long time as well.
Yeah, damn it, 10 years. I feel like at this point.
Yeah, decade. So,
damn.
I think he was 2015, maybe.
I think so. 2015, 14, around there.
Yeah, so it's 10 years you're coming up on. It's tough. Naz Reid, young player. I like what he has to offer. He's probably looking to stay in Minnesota. I don't. And it's funny. I saw a meme. It was they laughed at us, said it was easy to get back to the finals when it was the Warriors, Cavs every single year.
Yeah, that's
jokes. Crazy, that was gonna be 10 straight years. Warriors, Cavs, Warriors, Cavs. LeBron. He runs through the East because the East is weak. He went to the West, won a championship.
Mm-hmm.
It just goes to show you how gifted and skilled the Warriors dynasty was, or even the LeBron era when he was with the Heat when they went to 3 straight finals appearances. Because we haven't seen, when was the last time, who's the 2018 champ?
It was the Warriors, right? 17-18.
17-18 was the Warriors, and I think it was KD's
last 2 years in Golden State, yeah.
Yep, and they won 2, and then before that you had the Warriors run. Before that it was the Heat. You had the Spurs who won a championship at the end of there, and they were floating back and forth. And dynasties are hard to build, man. When you had, what Curry and Clay did was special with Draymond and Kerr, where they went from Mark Jackson to Steve Kerr. It's insane what they did. I just don't think you're ready to say a dynasty yet, just because the Bucks did look so dominant. They retained most of their players. You watch some of them regress. Then last year, we're in a league where coaches are on the hot seat every single year. I mean, you got championship pedigree coaches getting fired year after they win a championship. They get bounced. People are calling for names. They want to take accountability. This front office, they want to build a dynasty like the Warriors did, like I wouldn't say the Cavs. They only won one championship, but they were,
made the finals. They were in the race. Yeah,
exactly. So, I mean, if you look at the closest thing to the dynasty, you could say, it's been the Celtics, it's been the Heat.
That's what I would say. I would say the Celtics, but I feel like they would have had to win.
Yeah, they have to win.
If they would have won in 22,
if they win
maybe.
Now, could you say they're building? If they win one and go back to the finals, possibly.
I feel like maybe the dynasty window is closed for the Celtics, but if they win this championship now, I think, like you mentioned, I think it's too late for them to go on a run with these guys. The way all these guys are getting max money.
Yeah.
Porzingis, Al Horford, these guys are injury prone, banged up. Drew Holiday, he's on the other side of 30. Like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, those guys are hitting their prime. And Derek White on the tail end. Like outside of that, you haven't really seen much, and I don't think those two guys within themselves have proven to be, or they haven't proven to be enough to win the championship and get over that hump. So maybe if it was 22 and they beat the Warriors and, they still had time to build and then they added all of this, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe they could have been on a little dynasty run. But, yeah, I think the dynasty window is closed, but they could definitely still win the championship this year. The only one that's sneaky could be the Mavericks, whereas Luka,
if they add a piece,
is like smack dab in his prime. And if he figures out a way, to get past the Wolves and then win the championship, like you mentioned, you add a piece, you keep Kyrie around for 2 or 3 years. He's on the end of heading towards the end of his career, but the way he plays offensively, it's not like he adds so much wear and tear to his body.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you got Lively, you got all these big guys, PJ Washington. He's relatively, still in his prime. So I think the Mavericks, if they can get to a certain level and figure out how to be good enough, I think they would be the best candidate. I mean, obviously, if the Pacers somehow figure some shit out. Well, we're not even going to address that. But, I mean, listen, championship DNA, Pascal Siakam. Regardless, I think the Mavs would be the best pick in terms of all the teams left, in terms of dynasty winning back-to-back.
Yeah.
If everything falls right and they can get guys to play, it's like to a certain level, I think it would be. But in terms of winning the championship this season, I think the Timberwolves and the Celtics have the best chance.
But the Timberwolves could have the chance if they're able to win a championship and figure out pieces where you do keep Ant as the cornerstone of your franchise. He's still so young. You could build another team around him, kind of like you got now. But
yeah, you definitely could.
Yeah, it's.
But will it take time, to build that team and for
back
Ant
up again
to reach the potential to
maybe
where
kind of like you see with the Bucks now, another small market team
to where he can backpack, because right now Anthony Edwards, as good as he's playing, this Minnesota team has been team basketball.
Yeah,
he hasn't been carrying. There's been games where he's gone out and definitely carried and put the team on his back, but there's been other times, like even against the Nuggets, he had 43 and they lost. He hasn't been doing everything on his own, and Ant will tell you it's a team game. He's the one coming out and saying Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Cat, all of these guys. Like, how long will it take to find also the perfect pieces to have around Ant, who is such an athletic guard, whose game tailors so much to him getting to the rim.
Yeah,
he's able to space with all these big guys like Cat and Nas who can shoot the ball. That make it so much easier for him, because if Ant was playing with Gafford and Lively, I think it'll look a lot different. I don't think he'd be as successful as Luka is, the way he's able to kind of his play style, where Luka's more of a create, space the floor, whereas Ant, his three ball has definitely gotten better. It's come along, but Ant, he's super athletic. He's trying to blow by you and get to the rim. So I definitely think team construction and having the right pieces around is all definitely super important, especially for this Minnesota team. It kind of feels like they have every right piece in the right spot right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the history of dynasties, you got, if you look way back, Bill Russell obviously was a dynasty in himself, but you look at the Lakers way back in the day, dynasty. And then you look at the Bulls in the 90s, that was a dynasty. Then you fast forward to the 2000s, maybe the Spurs, they only won one championship before. They didn't win it till the 2010s, that second one. The Lakers, they, three-peat. Yep. So you're averaging one every 10 years. So would you consider the Heat? I wouldn't, because Braun left, kind of broke up that dynasty.
Well, I would say that would be a dynasty.
2 championships, 4 years, 4 finals appearances, but it could have been so much more. It could have been what the Warriors had. I mean, I know Curry stuck around. Clay obviously not the same with injuries, but KD left.
Yeah, but that was different, just because the 3 most important pieces to that Warriors dynasty was all homegrown. They all felt not indebted, but they all felt like they belonged in Golden State. Whereas when you look at the Heat, the only real person that was homegrown that was there was D Wade. Yeah.
Shout out Mario Chalmers, man.
Yeah, they built the team around me. Yeah, LeBron, he's his entire career has been more of a mercenary. Signing these 1-year deals, kind of moving around, playing to his ability. And Chris Bosh, like we all know, came over from Toronto. Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of having the most important impact players, it's tough, because I think that's what makes that Warriors dynasty so hard to come by, because you literally hit on the greatest shooter of all time, arguably the best point guard of all time, arguably the second best shooter of all time.
Two-way, two in Clay.
Yeah, exactly. Arguably the best shooter of all time, and then in his prime, an elite perimeter defender, and then one of the most unique players in NBA history in Draymond, undersized. Yeah, undersized big, especially Draymond doesn't work in any other era of basketball, but it was just so perfect during that time. That's literally when 5-out small ball was at its peak. Draymond was running center at 6'7", and the Warriors were just going out and just shooting everyone out the gym. Draymond was able to just guard all these big men and stuff, and he didn't have to do much, just because where Clay and Steph weren't missing. So you didn't have to grab all these boards and do all this stuff inside. But Draymond Green was a super good interior defender. Even on the perimeter, added switch ability. It was a really good rebounder,
could
in his
shoot
prime.
The rock.
Exactly. So I think that Warriors team was super unique and just super crazy one-off, and in the perfect era of basketball for the way things were being played. Because you see now, you kind of, even though they're not all in their prime, but the Warriors' size is he's giving them so many problems now that you have all these big guys. Like we mentioned, you look at a Luka who's 6'8", 6'9". You look at, we talk about Cat, Nas, those guys that can shoot the ball. Jokic, a 7-foot center that makes on every single level. These are all guys that kill the Warriors and give them problems.
They do the same thing those small ball bigs do, exactly. But now they're just 7 feet much tall.
Size. Yeah, exactly. So
you got the Chets of the world, the Victors.
Yeah. And you didn't even touch on Wemby. So now, so it'd be tough for that Warriors team, especially in their prime, to have that same success now, just because there was no one around during that time that could give them the issues that they had inside. It was basically just an all guard oriented league, especially around that time. You look, Westbrook was going off. I mean, you mentioned D Rose when he won his MVP in his prime, he was going off. John Wall, that's when he was in his prime, running around. All of these guys that were having success.
Just had to slide John Wall in there.
Come on, bro. Prime John Wall. That's an all-star, bro.
He was. All-time finesse.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's when, guards were kind of running the league.
Play,
Harden in his prime, another guy on the perimeter. All these guards were running the league. Now it's moved, So, I think maybe the next dynasty we see is a team kind of, revolved around that size and having all these big perimeter
You're going with the Mavs. No, you said the Wolves.
No, I think the Mavs, if they figure out a way to win, could possibly have the best chance. But I think I'm picking the Wolves to win the championship this year.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
No doubt. I like that one. I like it. Any more? You got any more?
No, that's it, man. We covered it.
Yeah, definitely did. First game tipped the night, 8 o'clock. We'll see if the Pacers steal one on the road. I think the Celtics have only lost at home twice this playoffs. They were both game 2s. against the Heat and the Cavs. So to see if the Pacers could get it done on the road in one of these two games. Mavs T-Wolves, as I said, tomorrow night, going to be great series, great matchup out in the West Coast as well. Go to Go, episode 91. Go to Go, everything, Apple, Spotify, stream, whatever. Go to Go pod on TikTok. And until next week, man, peace.